Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. Today's first story is about a workplace veteran who treated her years of service like a permanent hall pass, especially when it came to office supplies that mysteriously vanished every quarter. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. The great office supply heist ended not with a firing. I've been working at this marketing firm for about 3 years now, and honestly, for the most part, it's a good place to be. The work is steady, the clients are interesting enough to keep things from getting boring, and most of my colleagues are genuinely pleasant people. We grab coffee together, complain about deadlines, and occasionally vent about upper management like a normal office ecosystem. Except for Diane. Diane sits 3 cubicles down from me and has been at the company for 15 years, and she makes sure absolutely everyone knows it. She brings it up constantly, usually in ways that have nothing to do with the conversation at hand. If someone mentions a process change, she'll sigh and say, "Well, in my 15 years here." If a new hire asks a question, she'll respond with, "When you've been here as long as I have, you'll understand." Seniority, in her mind, isn't just experience, it's a license to do whatever she wants. Lately, though, her most irritating trait hasn't been the condescension, it's been her completely unhinged obsession with office supplies. Last Tuesday, I was putting together materials for an important client presentation. One of those meetings where everything has to look polished and professional because the client's the type that notices details. I went to staple a packet together and realized my stapler was missing. That wasn't surprising in itself, things disappear sometimes, but mine had vanished the week before, and I distinctly remember leaving it on my desk. Mildly annoyed, I figured I'd just grab one from the supply cabinet, except the cabinet was empty. Completely empty. Not a single stapler, no pens, no notebooks, nothing. Which made 0 sense, because we'd had a supply delivery literally the day before. I asked around, assuming there had to be a logical explanation. Madison from accounting casually mentioned, "Oh, I saw Diane carrying a big box to her car during lunch yesterday. She said it like it was no big deal." But that little comment lodged itself in my brain. Later that afternoon, curiosity got the better of me. I took a long route back from the break room and happened to pass Diane's cubicle from an angle I don't usually see. And that's when I noticed it. Behind her desk, partially hidden by a filing cabinet, was a mountain of office supplies. And I do mean a mountain. At least 6 staplers still in packaging, stacks of brand new notebooks, more pens than I've probably used in my entire career, highlighters, sticky notes, folders, and sitting right on top of everything like a trophy were 3 of the new wireless mice IT had told me were on back order when I requested one the previous month. I just stood there for a second staring, trying to process what I was seeing. It wasn't subtle, it wasn't accidental. It was deliberate hoarding. The next morning, I decided to handle it the adult way and mentioned to our office manager, Jen, that I couldn't find a stapler or any supplies, really. She didn't even look surprised. She sighed the kind of sigh that comes from having this exact conversation far too many times and said, "Let me guess, you need notebooks, pens, maybe a mouse too?" When I nodded, she leaned in and lowered her voice. "This happens every quarter. Diane takes everything and claims she needs backups for her important projects. I've already ordered replacements, but they won't arrive until next week." That explained a lot. It also explained why this had been allowed to continue for so long. Everyone was exhausted by it. Then yesterday happened. I was printing handouts for a client meeting scheduled in 30 minutes when the printer flashed toner low. No problem, I thought. I'll just swap it out. I went to the supply cabinet again, already knowing what I'd find. Nothing. At that point, I didn't really have a choice. I walked over to Diane's cubicle and politely asked if she might happen to have an extra toner cartridge. She looked at me like I'd just asked her to donate a kidney. "Why would I have printer toner at my desk?" she snapped. "That's ridiculous." Right on cue, her phone rang. As she turned to answer it, her chair bumped into a large tote bag under her desk. The bag shifted, and there they were. 3 toner cartridges, plain as day. I felt my patience evaporate, but I kept my voice calm. When she finished her call, I said, "Diane, I can see the toner cartridges in your bag. The entire office needs supplies to do their jobs, not just you." Her face turned bright red. "I've been here 15 years, she yelled. "I need these supplies for my special projects. You newcomers don't understand how things work here." By now, people were openly watching. That's when Jen showed up, took one look at the situation, and said firmly, "Diane, we've talked about this before. Please return the supplies to the cabinet immediately." Diane muttered about ungrateful coworkers and no respect for seniority as she handed over exactly one toner cartridge like she was making some huge sacrifice. A few hours later, an email from HR hit everyone's inbox announcing a new supply checkout system effective immediately. Shortly after that, I noticed maintenance installing a lock on the supply cabinet. And then came the best part. This morning I walked in and noticed Diane's cubicle was completely empty. No chair, no monitors, no tote bag, just a small note from our manager explaining she'd be working from home indefinitely. The supply cabinet, meanwhile, was fully stocked. Miraculously, everyone's missing staplers, mice, and notebooks had reappeared. Some people really do believe the rules don't apply to them, until they finally do. That isn't entitlement, mate. That's mental illness. She needs some help more than anything else. And our next story. How my wife's boss tried to sell the company she built. My spouse was the second person ever hired at a consulting company in a very specialized industry. When she joined, it was barely more than a startup operating out of a single office with the owner and a handful of clients. Over the next 15 years, that firm grew into a respectable operation with 3 offices, each employing roughly 8 to 10 people. From the outside, it looked like a typical success story, a small firm that had carved out a solid niche and grown steadily over time. What most people didn't see was how dependent the company was on my wife. She wasn't just another consultant. She had the credentials, the education, the experience, and, most importantly, the relationships. She was the person clients trusted. She was the one who understood the technical side of the work and how to explain it clearly to executives and regulators. When new business came in, it was because of her reputation, her presentations, and her ability to deliver consistently. Over time, she became the face of the company in the industry, whether the owner acknowledged it or not. As the firm grew, so did her responsibilities. What started as consulting work gradually expanded into training junior staff, managing client relationships, overseeing projects, and handling day-to-day operational decisions. Meanwhile, the owner slowly faded into the background. He was physically present less and less, and mentally present even less than that. By the end, he was absent roughly 75% of the time, leaving my wife to effectively run the company without the title, authority, or equity to match. Despite this, he regularly made comments about eventually retiring and selling her the business. These weren't formal discussions, no valuations, no timelines, no written agreements, just vague assurances dropped into conversation. Whenever she pushed for clarity, he would say things like, "One day this will all be yours," or "When I step back, you'll be the natural choice." It was always just far enough in the future to avoid commitment. His dependence on her was so extreme that at one point he took out a life insurance policy on her. That alone should have raised every alarm bell, but at the time she took it as an awkward compliment, proof of how essential she was to the company's survival. I mostly stayed out of it. It was her career, her workplace, and I didn't want to interfere unless she asked. But there was one moment that stuck with me. At a major industry dinner we attended together, one of those events where reputation and perception actually matter, he introduced her to a table of senior people as my girl Friday, essentially a glorified secretary. This was in front of people who knew her work, who had hired the firm because of her, who assumed she was at least a partner. The look on her face said everything. Over the years, she tried repeatedly to formalize a path to ownership. She wasn't looking for a handout. She was willing to buy the firm, even if it took years. Every attempt ended the same way. Delays, excuses, reassurances without substance. Nothing ever materialized. Eventually, I told her bluntly what I saw from the outside. I said, "This guy doesn't respect you or your contribution. He will never sell you the business because there's no reason to. He makes more money keeping you exactly where you are. You are the business. Why would he sell it to you?" She didn't want to believe that. Loyalty was one of her defining traits, sometimes to her own detriment. She'd stayed through lean years, skipped paychecks when cash was tight, worked through holidays, missed anniversaries and family events, and carried the firm on her back without complaint. Then one day, out of nowhere, she received a raise and a small bonus. Nothing meaningful given her role, along with a new contract. The contract included a non-compete with a non-disclosure agreement. When she read it closely, it was obvious what it was designed to do: lock her in and prevent her from leaving for another firm. That alone was suspicious. What made it unmistakable was the phone call that followed. A competitor reached out to her and said they were in the final stages of due diligence to acquire her company and wanted to meet her. She hadn't been told the firm was for sale. She hadn't been asked if she wanted to buy it. She hadn't even been informed discussions were happening. The raise, the bonus, the contract, it all clicked into place. He was selling the company out from under her and trying to make sure she couldn't go anywhere afterward. That was the angriest I've ever seen her. Not dramatic anger, cold, focused fury. 15 years of loyalty, sacrifice, and trust had been met with deception and disrespect. There were no other enforceable agreements in place, and she ignored the new contract entirely. She was legally free. We sat down and talked seriously about starting her own firm. I asked one very practical question: how much of the business is contractually obligated to stay if you leave? It turned out most client agreements were either handshake deals or 30-day at-will contracts. Then I asked how many clients would actually follow you. She said without hesitation about 75%, including the firm's largest revenue source, a client who didn't even know the owner personally. That was the moment everything changed. Within weeks, she scheduled a 3-week vacation, time she had accumulated over years and never used. During that vacation, she quietly executed the cleanest exit imaginable. She rented office space in the same building. She set up a new company, arranged insurance, legal structure, and basic operations. She deliberately left all company property behind and documented everything to avoid giving the old firm even a hint of litigation leverage. She contacted her clients carefully and professionally. She told them she was leaving. If they wanted to explore moving their accounts, they would need to terminate their existing agreements first. No pressure, no solicitation, just transparency. Most understood immediately. While she was on vacation, the owner called her in a panic. One of their major clients had terminated their contract. "We lost XYZ company," he said. "Do you know anything about it?" She replied calmly, "I'm sorry, but I just sent you an email. I've resigned. My keys and company property are on my desk." And that was that. The new firm absorbed roughly 90% of the old company's business. The transition was so seamless that functionally it was the same company, just with a new name and an owner who actually did the work. Most of the staff followed her as well. Within a year, the old firm collapsed, leaving only a small office that the former owner ran himself. Occasionally, she sees him in the building. He scowls. She doesn't. She didn't destroy his company. She simply took back what had always been hers. I think a lot of people miss how hard it is to walk away from something you helped build. This wasn't just a job, it was her identity, her relationships, her reputation. Leaving meant risking all of that. The fact that the clients followed her so quickly shows where the real value was all along. Businesses don't collapse overnight unless they were already hollow. He didn't lose his company, he lost access to the person who made it viable. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.